recruiting is really at its peak,
Hmm.
from what I've been recognizing, and it's really $1 million industry right now plus.
Yeah,
So
Michael, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been a long time. I've known you for a while, and to see the progress that you've made along the past several years, and now you're one of the top tech recruiters right there at Belkin, doing amazing things, helping individuals find their dream jobs, and it's so awesome to have you. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
it's a pleasure to be here, to be able to connect and to talk about what's been going on the past few years. I know it's been a few years since we last connected, and there's a great history there.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful to be able to connect with you on what's been going on, what I'm doing now, and the ins and outs of it, just to be able to chat on what's going on here at Belkin.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. So let's jump right into what. So what is it that you're focused on right now? Well, you're a tech recruiter. We'll talk about the history on how we got there, but what is it that made you want to join Balkan in the first place?
One of the biggest things that, as I stepped into tech recruiting, I realized that I wanted to be a part of an organization that had a solid culture,
Hmm.
and getting to know the management. That's been the biggest thing. Is the emphasis is creating an environment where everyone is really growth minded. That was something that was almost difficult to find in most companies. That's not really the case sometimes. I can't speak for all companies, but one of the things that I love about Belkin is that they're very growth oriented with their organization. I mean, one of the things that stuck out to me a lot was they don't really have quote unquote an HR team. They have a people organization, and that was the first time I heard that
Huh.
term
Yeah.
coined. Uh, More in just in any company to begin with. So I started to understand why that was the case, because they wanted to really come about it differently. They wanted to they created this, I guess, people organization that consisted of like talent acquisition. Of course, within that umbrella, there's like technical recruiting, which I'm able to be a part of. But the reason why they have it set up that way is because they probably they want it to be inviting, as
Right.
well as they want to distinguish themselves from other companies. So that
Hmm.
was actually one of the first questions I asked them when I was interviewing with them. Why is it that this is set up that way?
Yeah.
Why is it that you call yourself a people organization, which normally I would assume is the HR department and a part of that umbrella, but ultimately they wanted to take a different approach, and it just seems very progressive. And
Hmm.
being able to connect with the management, it's just phenomenal where their mindset is at, some of the initiatives they're taking on, again bringing it back to just the culture, how much they're very growth oriented. So
Yeah,
that's
because
that's a big thing.
when I hear HR, obviously there's a lot of different pillars that are underneath that umbrella. But when I hear
Yeah,
HR, if I'm working for an organization, I'm thinking about who do I go for when I have an issue within our company. You know, I'm having an
yeah.
issue with my supervisor. I got to talk to someone above him. Let me go talk to HR. That's all you think about with that term. But I love this whole people organization because yeah, it encompasses so much more than that. Talking about your wins or talking about how I can advance within my role here to get to the next level. Maybe go to someone that's organizing that entire team structure. That's amazing. And so, in the previous company that you were with, was it labeled as HR or a different term as well?
So the prior organization that I was with was more just like your standard, not to say it's standard, but just more as a technical recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
In some aspects, I was taking on the same level of responsibility, but in other aspects, I wasn't. So now, just to give you some insight, there really wasn't an HR department prior to where I was at. I mean, there's always HR, but it wasn't as clear to me. So it was definitely a shift coming into Belkin, where it was a lot more inviting, in the sense where this is a people organization that's a lot more approachable.
Yeah.
Where prior it was mostly just recruiter, technical recruiter. That was my title. That was my essentially almost a year of working in staffing and getting my feet wet with that, understanding the ins and out of just the technical world. So that was, to me, that was a great experience. One of the biggest takeaways I will say from working at the Judge Group, which was a staffing agency I was a part of, was just how extensive the training is in a positive way, of course.
Yeah.
How they break down, from month to month what it would look like to really step into the technical world because I had no prior experience to that.
Hmm.
Prior to that, I was working as a corporate recruiter. One aspect to that was essentially I was a sales recruiter, so I would hire for a lot of both entry level roles, call center positions, outside sales roles later on in my time there with that company. But coming into the Judge Group, that's where one thing that I can positively take away was they had an extensive 3 month training program to help me understand what it means to be a Java developer and just entering into this world that I had no knowledge
Hmm.
of. So that's one, despite just being a technical recruiter and not necessarily being in the umbrella of HR, or now I'm a part of quote unquote the people team
Yeah.
here at Belkin, it still did a lot with being able to equip me to where I'm at now, which is something that I can definitely take away. And many can, if they're stepping into staffing as well. Hopefully they can expect a similar experience where it's, if you don't have any technical experience, some, if not most, staffing companies will be able to equip you properly where you'll be able to understand it within less than a year, which is phenomenal. I mean, it's kind of unheard of, but I mean, we're kind of living in a world where we're now like recruiting is really at its peak,
Hmm.
from what I've been recognizing, and it's really $1 million industry right now plus.
Yeah.
So it's been great to see that, and that was a great overall experience. And there's distinctions there, of course.
Yeah, because I mean, this whole world, it's also new to me. I got
Yeah,
into something similar. I mean, I'm not a recruiter myself. I'm not in the recruiting industry, but I do work with a company that we help individuals that are in that space. But it was very amazing for me to just for it to open up my eyes to this world of like, wait, what do you mean people can't just go and apply for these jobs and that was it, and then they get a yes or no whether they're hired or not. There's a very extensive process. Like, you need the recruiter,
yeah,
you need to talk to the hiring managers, you need to talk to, in this case, the engineering, the director of engineering that's going to interview you as well. I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a minute, but it's like it's a full-blown process from start to finish, from application to getting an offer letter that I wasn't even aware of. I'm sure you started understanding when you got into the Judge Group. But we'll put a pause to that for a moment. Let's back up a little bit further than that. The way that I know Michael is he was actually one of my students at in high school, where I went there and I coached the memory team. I know this is kind of weird, but I'm a memory athlete. I teach people how to memorize things very quickly, and he was one of the individuals there. He was a part of the A team that we took
yeah,
to New York, and they actually ended up with no experience prior to
yeah,
us starting this competition, this event, this team. We went to New York at the national competition, at the USA Memory Championship, and they ended up taking home the gold medal. Michael and a few other memory athletes that we took from Bow High School over there took the medal in numbers. Talk to me a little bit about that, because it's been a few years, but what was that experience like for you? I'm just curious to see like the insides of now. Obviously you graduated, you went on, you're very successful in this field, but it's interesting for me to see like what type of impact was being made back then. What was that experience like for
yeah.
you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really pivotal. Thinking back now, really understanding the value behind mentorship and coaching. And it's something that I've carried with me. Now just it's definitely changed into where I'm at in my career now, realizing then as I take a step back, I I've realized the importance of having someone that you can go under their wing
Hmm.
and how impactful that can be with someone experienced and knowledgeable in a specific area or career, and how that transfer of knowledge can do a lot for you. To this day, that is my fun fact to almost everyone.
No way.
Yeah, to this day, that is my fun fact for the organization that I joined. That's what I shared in my interview process with Belkin.
Huh.
And that's essentially what I share with almost any new group, outside of work as well. And it's something to this day that I'll still and moving forward that I'll still always carry with me.
Hmm.
Because again, it was pivotal for me where I think for the first time you were able to believe in us as a team, as a unit, and pour into us, teach us, equip us, coach us, where now being in my career and really taking a deeper step into the world of recruiting and talent acquisition, I realized that positions can be obtained as long as you have the right mentorship, the right coaching, and the time and effort that you put into something. So
Right.
back then, it's surreal to think that we were able to accomplish what we accomplished. But of course, looking at it, it's because we had someone to walk us through that, to guide
Mm.
us, to encourage us, as well as to inform us throughout
Yeah.
understanding that process. So it's really empowering now in the field that I'm in now, because I think about, what could the next 5 years look like, and realistically, it can really be stepping into operations, myself being a director in recruiting and talent acquisition, and I wholeheartedly believe that that's definitely possible because of even a moment like that really feels like a core memory. So it was it was really helpful, and I'm glad that we're able to connect now and really recap and regroup after
Yeah.
such a long time.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for for that. And yeah, I think about that. I have the medal actually right here. Look at this. Remember this? This is you. You got
No
this.
way.
Look at this. It's a Team USA. I'll put it up there, but I'll put it here as well. This is your medal. I still have it. And
Wow.
20 March 29th, 2014. Team Speed Numbers event. This was Michael's medal right here. That's cool. Do you remember that day?
Yeah, I remember that overall trip. I remember that was the first time that I've ever really had I got to travel out of state. My mom was a liaison,
Oh yeah.
and we stayed a little bit longer. So
That's
to
right.
this day, I'm able to kind of really hold those memories dear to me. That was a great time. And
Yeah.
just the overall process, I still get questions to this day when I do share that fun fact, like, how did you do it? Do you still remember those
Yeah.
things? I'm like, I wish I could. But it takes consistent
Right,
effort
right.
and time. You have to be intentional.
Mhm.
So I still remember that day so clearly. I still remember that time leading up to it, the time just, we spent as a group just being able to focus and thinking about, okay, we can potentially win this. Can we win this? And to that moment where we stepped on stage and they announced us as winners, that was great. And
Mhm.
again, I think that's really important for someone that's young, that's out there, that's maybe even still going through that process of coming out of college or stepping into college, or you know if I can really share some insight,
Yeah, definitely.
those things do matter. Those projects you work on prior to stepping into your career, those trips that you take to compete, like I was able to do, and having those connections, prior to even stepping into college or while in college, those things are valuable because they can really be a part of like this memory that you can look back to as to what you accomplished and what you're capable of,
Mhm.
and it can kind of help you get further than where you think you can go. And again, when I think back to a memory like that, as silly as this is, but if I'm running and I'm like at mile 4, I'm like, I'm gonna go for mile 5. I
Mhm.
remember, and I'll think back, hey, I remember when I pushed myself.
Mhm.
So again, for anyone I think out there that's listening, that's more of a younger audience, like those things really do matter. Those projects you take on,
Right.
those, while in high school and in college, can really set you up for success later in life, where it really feels surreal as to the position that you're in, that you'll be in, and in the position that I'm in now. And I think it's, the reason why I believe I'm in the position that I'm in now is really those collective memories and the people that I've met along the way.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
memory,
Mhm.
people along the way.
Yeah, I agree. I'm helping my niece right now. She's about to transition into high school, going into ninth grade, and it's. I was reflecting back on this myself, where they're closing down a Macy's that I used to work at when I was in high school, back home in California, and I was driving by it, and it's like you see the fork, closing, everything must go sign, and I walked in there, and I'm like, man, I used to work here, but back then I thought, okay, this is just a job, this is just a paycheck. But when you think
Right.
back on even that like little job where it doesn't matter much, right? Or at least you thought it didn't matter much in the moment. You're like, I'm just collecting this paycheck so I can go out on the weekend and go make my car payments or whatever. But
Yeah.
if you think back to even that, in your first job, you got out of high school, out of college, doing these different activities, different events. Maybe it was joining the band. Maybe it was playing a sport like football, basketball, whatever it was. And for me, it was like all the little things, clocking in, clocking out, making sure that I'm
Yeah.
folding the clothes the right way, putting it where it was at, where it's supposed to be at. The customer service aspect of it, where I'm communicating with people, I'm networking.
Yeah.
I'm hearing the complaints that customers are having. So all of that, and then moving forward, I got into other forms
Yeah.
of sales later on as well, where you're talking to people in a unique way, trying to recruit them into different businesses. But
Right.
all of that plays a part in your growth, um,
Yeah.
and it will help you. And that's what I try to instill that in my niece right now as well. Like, I don't want to take this class and that class. I'm like, it's not about the class. It's about you like just taking something, even if you don't want to, but doing your absolute best to making sure that at the end of it, you're like, I did my best in that subject, whether I got an A, whether I got a B, a C, whatever it was, but I gave it my best. And that is what's going to help you forward in anything you do later on in life. So out of high school, out of college, I know you were doing a few different like
Yeah.
businesses and different ventures, like a lot of us that were just trying to figure things out. But once you
Yeah.
finally got into the judge group, like what made you decide to that you wanted to go down this path of possibly being a tech recruiter even before joining it? But you're like, you know what, this is interesting. Like, what sparked that curiosity in you to want to like pursue that further?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing initially, I wanted to, as you probably, when we used to connect, even a couple of years ago, I wanted to run my own company. I wanted to I wanted to lead a group. I wanted to be able to go ahead and provide direction in some way. And ultimately, I wanted to have like at least for my personal view, it doesn't have to be anyone else that's listening, but I wanted to have more of like a marketplace ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be able to, that for me, my purpose is through my faith, but it doesn't again have to be for anyone. But I feel the need to really connect with people on a one-on-one basis. I
Yeah.
love being able to connect with people, and I think that's a big part as to why I'm at where I'm at now. I recognize that I can build solid connections with people. I recognize that right out of college. Again, as you had mentioned, I was stepping into other ventures, businesses, and other ideas that I did have, and that really set me up in a way where I realized, if I can network with people, if I can grab a cup of coffee with someone,
Mm-hmm.
and talk to them about what's going on in their life and help them out and try to steward my skills in terms of communication in some way, how can I do that on a larger scale? So
Mm.
aside from being, you know, I think most of us are either, process oriented or more result oriented in some manner. But I wanted to, now where I'm at now with Belkin, thinking about the future, you know, I want to be able to step into something where whether it's one day being like the VP of talent acquisition or stepping into a role like that, the reason why I want to step into that is primarily because I want to be able to impact an organization on a
Mm-hmm.
larger scale, on a global scale. And the reason that came about as well is because I realized that what a one-on-one connection can do for a person, and how if you can create a culture that's inviting, and how important that can be.
Right.
So for me, I love people, and I love what instilling a culture with intentionality can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it can make people feel like they're really not working. And if you can sustain a culture like that, which I hope one day that I can create, where I can employ or lead people in a way where they feel not only like it's family, but ultimately that they can feel productive in what they're doing, and they can find purpose in what they're doing, even in the mundane. To me, that's encouraging. To me, that brings meaning. So for me, my why is to do something outside of myself, and to be able to go ahead and even through work minister to people in some way.
Right.
And to me it's kind of hard. I think for some of us it may be hard to think, how can my purpose be in work if sometimes all it's going to do is create a paycheck? And some of us are in different seasons where that may be the case where, hey, I'm at this job because I need to pay the bills X, Y, and Z. But you can definitely find meaning in that, and I feel like that's a big part of what I want to do. I love people, and being able to lead people on a larger scale is definitely something I can see myself doing.
Yeah, I can see it for sure. It's gonna happen. It's already happening. That's the next stage and the next phase of your evolution is definitely to go down that path, and you're doing it day by day. What do you when you were prior to Belkin, when you were doing working at the judge group? What made you want to keep going and talking to people? Like what were some of those like those moments that just made you smile when you were talking to someone? Even let's think back to the first placement that you made. You know, you got your first rec, your first like, okay, Michael, this is it. You're on your own. Go and find someone that can fill this position, or that it's perfect for this position. What was that like for you when you got the first individual to go from a candidate to finally giving them an offer?
I was like, finally. But I learned a lot through that. I still remember to this day, it was, I believe, like senior software engineer with specific, like a text, specific, it was a niche skill set that they were looking for. And at the end of it, I I felt grateful that I was able to connect with this person along the way, because one of the things that I've realized is that the market is incredibly competitive and people are interviewing with multiple companies.
Hmm.
So I learned how to really build fast relationships within my time at Judge. Not only fast relationships, but meaningful ones as well. Where my first placement was, it was so interesting because, again, just being able to work with them on like what they're gonna earn and all these other aspects to it. One thing stuck out to me about the specific candidate, actually. Uh, I can share this person actually works at Ingram Micro now and still there. They were taking on a 12 plus month contract.
Hmm.
But one thing that really stuck out to me is how, I'm not saying easy it is to break into the technical world,
Hmm.
but this person didn't have like an official college degree,
Wow.
and they primarily took classes to get a certification. So it really impacted me in a positive way, because I thought, I've been connecting with this guy, and then my account manager and I scheduled to actually have lunch with him.
Hmm.
One of the nicest people that I've met, and even since then, I still followed up with this guy afterwards, and a lot of it is maintaining those relationships even afterwards. But I mean, as much as the relationship did impact me, it also helped me realize that, if someone is out there and they feel like there's this gap between where they're at
Yeah.
and, this industry and technology, just realize there are people out there that didn't go to college
Mm-mm.
and still made it into the technical world as an engineer or developer, but they took different steps. They were able to get a couple certifications, like their AWS certification and other ones,
Yeah.
and it led them to being a part of a solid organization. Ingram Micro is actually, I believe, another consumer electronics company
Hmm.
uh, within that industry. I believe that's the industry that they're in. But what I learned from that as well is that, if again, if you wanted to seriously take another career trajectory, another career route, that you can do that. It's just going to take a
Yeah.
lot more effort and intentionality to do so. But uh, I'm still impacted by that, because this, I asked him, I was running his background, and I was like, hey man, by the way, they're asking for like your education, your transcripts for college, and it's like, hey, I didn't go to college,
Yeah.
and I was like, wow,
You're like,
and
I
I and
wasted
I
my time.
and I was like, wow, and just to get some insight in the technical world, as you know, Lewis, I mean, these are high paying jobs,
Hmm.
for architects, for people that are like senior or developers, senior software engineers, Python, senior Python developers, et cetera. These are people that are high income earners, and being able to take a step back, see what I was offering him, or what Judge was the contract that we were offering him. It really opened my eyes as to, okay, it feels like there's this gap,
Hmm.
but someone, if they wanted to, could take those steps. So it was really reassuring.
So what was it that made um is it Ingram want to hire him even though there was that gap of, let's say, education experience? Like why did they take their chance with him, or at Judge, like where they're like, yeah, let's give him a chance? What was the reasoning for
Uh,
that?
he was very personable,
Mm.
as well as he was still able to go ahead and start from the ground up with his experience. So it started as like a service desk technician, and then he jumped into it. So a lot of it was just him being able to have the right door opened. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, that can take networking, having the right connections, but he had the right experience without the education.
Yeah.
And even to this day, something that most engineering, or I don't want to speak for all engineering teams for throughout the board, but
Right.
I think in a time right now where it really is a candidate driven market, that's another thing too for managers out there to really think about and to consider, what are areas that we can make sacrifices on when it comes to finding talent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those areas, education. Just because someone has a computer science degree, or maybe rather than an engineer, I mean, engineering, depending on what that would look like, where are we willing to make sacrifices if someone has 4+ years of experience of what you're looking for? So, it was
Yeah.
really clear to see. It looked like another thing too, that they were willing to hire him because of the experience rather than the education.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. I follow a few people on LinkedIn, and actually just today, individual, he posted on there like his title is, he works at Google and he's like senior architect designer, something like that. Like he's in a tech space at Google, and then he wrote a comment like, I don't have a degree. And I was like, and you
Yeah,
work at Google? I'm like, what? That's crazy. A company that I'm in, Woven, we helped one of our clients to find someone. We call them hidden gems, but it was something similar. Like he was an individual, was a truck driver, like zero college experience. Like he didn't even take his first class, and he went through the process, and they ended up hiring him because he knew what he was doing. He took every
yeah,
single time that he had a break from driving, he was taking his online courses. He was learning how to code on his own, spending hours and hours learning how to code. So there's so many of these like hidden gems, these individuals that you can't just spot from looking at a resume.
yeah,
Or at times, I don't know if I'm sure you've ran into something like this where individual, he's like highly experienced, has all the technical requirements, but maybe they're just not that great at writing resumes. So
yeah,
they leave gaps on there where you're like, why didn't you put that on there? You should have put that on there. This could have gotten you this job or this other job. Have you ran into many people like that where they are like even overqualified, but they just maybe they're not the best at writing resumes?
yeah. I haven't ran into that much.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing that the discussion that I usually have or normally would have is more just gaps in a resume. Either, I mean, most people, if not everyone, was impacted by COVID. So
Yeah.
the biggest thing that I will see will be like a year or two gap between 2020 and now.
Yeah.
So that's usually what I address, and I'll go up to bat for them. I did that a lot, especially working at Judge. Not so much now working at Belkin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I was working at Judge, that's one of the it was that I ran into, and as well as working in staffing, there's a lot of contract to contract. So if you're working with a company, I used to run into this too with companies like Ticketmaster, where if we're hiring for, again, a full-time permanent position, they don't want to see those things.
Yeah.
Or they may not want to see those things. They want to see, someone with, 5 years at Apple, as a
Mm-hmm.
software engineer or like an iOS developer. So there are things to look out for. The thing that I've had experiences where I've had an Android developer that's going to get hired at a fintech company, where the biggest concern was, why is this person jumping from contract to contract? The thing is that you have to really bat for those people as well, because maybe that's all that maybe that's their preference, as well as maybe that's all they could really take on at the time.
Hmm.
That's all that was really offered, and then it just kind of became this trend. So being able to get clarity, and honestly, it's collaborating with those people that you source, that you connect with, and letting them know, hey, I want to be able to bat for you, but tell me a little bit why, being able to dig a little bit deeper. And when you do that, you can go ahead and connect with the account manager, the account executive, or go directly to the source, which is the engineering manager or that manager specifically. So
Hmm.
I think that's one thing too. That's one thing that I've run into where I have bat for candidates that have maybe, well, the term is called job hoppy,
Yeah.
and they were able to get an interview up until an offer. So
Mm.
being able to, I've had to be mindful as with that, as well as with the other example that I provided, someone that was impacted through COVID, or maybe they were laid off, or
Yeah.
maybe they, their situation changed. However, I'll ask questions like, hey, I see that you weren't working here for a year. You
Hmm.
haven't been working for a year or so. And this is mainly in staffing where I ran into this, but I'll ask, hey, did you work on other projects? Were you still coding? Like, were you still working on
Yeah.
personal projects? Just so I can go ahead and really show that there's still some things that you were doing. Because again,
Hmm.
like you said, Lewis, it's not everything is shown on paper. And it's important to be mindful that, again, it's a candidate driven market, as well as we're building relationships with people, and we don't want to disconnect from them or leave a bad
Right.
taste in their mouth just because one thing is going the other way. So
Yeah, exactly. And now you're at Belkin. You're hiring individuals all the time, or you're taking them from that initial stage, moving them forward. What is it that you love now about this experience that you're having at Belkin? I'm sure it's like evolved over the since your start, from that first interview, from that first job placement till now. Like, what is it that gets you still going, waking up out of bed to still help these candidates to get their jobs?
yeah, absolutely. And for the like I was saying in the beginning, it's very much growth oriented, where now it's I get to be able to not only hire talent, but really collaborate with the managers on the specifics of what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at the judge group, I would go on intake calls in qualified positions, asking those questions. Now I get to do it directly with the hiring manager. That's the hiring manager. That's, of course, that difference. But what really gets me going, especially connecting with these candidates, is how Belkin really sells itself. That's the one thing. So people coming into this, they know the brand.
Yeah.
They've either used Belkin products before, or they're excited about stepping into the position because they've heard great things about it. We
Mm.
have like a partnership with Apple, so people recognize that it's a good way to get your foot in the door, as well as grow in your career. So that was one of the things that was told to me, like, hey, Belkin does sell itself in some ways. And there's a lot of career trajectory that's visible. So that's one great thing that really gets me excited to talk to candidates, because when I talk to someone about the position, I always get this response like, yeah, of course I've heard of the company. So whenever I start my conversations or I'm screening someone, I'm like, hey, tell me what you know about Belkin. They're
Mm.
like, I've heard X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, that's great to know. So it's just a difference, because I
Right.
remember working at the first company that, as a recruiter, it was like a payment processing company, again, merchant services company. And I'd be like, so tell me what you have heard of this company. And they're like,
Nothing.
you tell me. So
Yeah.
and it's great really to see that shift. But I mean, again, it does have, like any company, there's always going to be challenges in the TA side.
Hmm.
But one thing I did want to address, other great things that I've been able to experience, is that I'm not saying staffing companies don't focus on this, but it's really great to see how we're constantly just working on spearheading projects like DEIB, diversity, inclusion. How are we connecting with candidates, and going, even looking at a pool of diversity.
Hmm.
So we have a manager, even with Belkin, that's really leading this, and it's really cool to see that, because we get to collaborate with him, as well as him collaborate with the talent acquisition team on recruiting talent. but not only talent, but being able to make it inclusive. So
Yeah.
that's another thing. For me, that's like, okay, not only am I working as a strategic sourcer slash recruiter, but I'm also being intentional with who am I bringing to Belkin? Who am I
Right.
introducing to Belkin? And it's so cool how when someone's a new hire, there's this large introduction. It's such like a home like feel. So, and we're constantly improving the experience for a new employee. So
Mm-hmm.
that it's night and day, as to working for a large organization. Again, being able, like, there are things coming down the pipeline where we're looking to give our career page and like a facelift, where we're trying to really go ahead and lean on the brand that we're a part of,
Yeah.
and as well as highlight specific things, as Belkin has a lot of things that we can continue to highlight. So it's a lot more different. There's a lot more projects to be able to work on, to think on,
Mm-hmm.
as well as, Belkin has not necessarily been a company that has hired entry level. So that's been the shift as well, where you'll work for a staffing agency where it's okay with, like, you'll have a mix of recs that you'll work with, and some of them are entry level. Most Belkin roles are not entry level. So even having ideas in mind, company wide, as to, like, hey, what does that look like for us to create programs, to offer opportunities for those coming out of college. So,
Right.
I feel grateful that in the near future, TBD, when we'll be able to do things like that, if we'll be able to do things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's night and day. Definitely working for, a company as large as Belkin, and still, staffing is huge. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just different approach to it all.
Yeah. It sounds like there is a difference. Like having that name recognition is huge. I'm not saying it's gonna make your job easier, but it definitely helps. It helps when a candidate knows who you are. And you don't have to necessarily pull them too much and drag them to the finish line, but they want to
Yeah.
actually, be there, be at the company. They've heard already great things from others and maybe already worked there, or from what you're telling them. Does it actually make your job easier as someone that's out there fishing or going out there and finding this talent, or is it more like your job now consists of going through people that are applying online on the Belkin website, so it makes your job a little bit easier that way, or are you still out there hunting on LinkedIn and whatnot?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's yes and no, a mix of both. I'd say more on the, like, I'd say like product development, like more on the product side, as well as accounting, as well as like marketing, everything aside from engineering. We'll have an influx of applicants where I'll be able to manage those pipelines. It's just it really comes down to engineering,
Hmm.
in how there's so many open positions throughout the country. So it is still competitive. It is
Right.
still competitive because, you know there's over like 300 positions that we've seen on LinkedIn for, like, a, let's say, example, Android developer.
Yeah.
So as much as Belkin does have that name, I think it's the same thing for, even like, for instance, Google, and I believe Apple. They're having their employees go back on site. So every company, I think, in some aspect, is kind of going through. Their employees are going through some level of change, and there's things that they're looking for that they may have, but we don't have, or vice versa. Like, we have that they don't have. So there's this little minor details. It's more on the specifics of the role. Like, is the position remote?
Mm-hmm.
Is it hybrid? Is it on site? So those things can pose as challenges. But overall, that's where, I can come in, as well as leverage LinkedIn to bring in talent, and
Right.
and that's been great. I've had experience using LinkedIn Recruiter for over a year now, like some time now. So being able to be intentional with messaging, sourcing, and building a pipeline, that's something that I've been able to do, uh, for the, engineering side of things. So more on the engineering is where we still have to be. I still have to be more strategic in my
Mm-hmm.
sourcing.
Yeah, I'm hearing that across the board. I talked to a lot of recruiters, Even on the engineering side, so I'm talking to a lot of VPs of engineering, directors of engineering, and it's a challenge across the board, from enterprise companies, scale ups, unicorns, you name it, startups.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an issue. I was just thinking like maybe Belkin and Apple, Google, it's easier, but no, like you're saying, everyone's uh, they're competing, because even if Google they go everyone back in the office. Candidates are like, no, I like working
Yeah.
remote. I'm not going back in. I'll go to another company, even though they're a startup or they're maybe a scale up and they're growing. I'd rather go work for them because they're allowing me to work from wherever. I'm in Hawaii right now, working
Yeah.
from my laptop. So what would you get? I'll wrap this up here, and I could talk to you for hours about this and many other things, but I know you have to go as well, take care of business. But one last thing, what advice would you give to someone that was applying, say a role at Belkin, Android developer, or any other tech roles that you need to be filled? Someone's applying at your job, or you're looking for them. Like, what is it that you would recommend for them to even put on the resume, or what for them to have an exceptional interview experience when they come and interview with you or your hiring manager?
Yeah, I'd say one thing is just to be flexible.
Hmm.
Managers are sometimes busy. Things might, the processes may take some time, especially for a company like Belkin and as well as larger companies. So being flexible and open-minded, as well as really bringing your authentic self and expressing passion as to why you want to work for a company.
Yeah,
From the time that I've had thus far with Belkin, it's been a short period of time, and I'm excited for my time to continue to, to continue to grow with the company. But one thing that I have heard from a couple of, if not a few, hiring managers in different departments is they want someone that is essentially the self-starter, but also importantly is someone that's expressing passion
hmm.
in their work, that want that, essentially a passionate person. It's a very niche company, working on the consumer electronics side. So the biggest thing that I've seen them that they want to understand is why do you want to work here? Like what are you going to bring to the table, in the sense like why are you passionate about Belkin?
Hmm.
So if and I think that can stem from just being your authentic self and genuinely coming up with reasons as to why this is a company that you can see yourself developing in. Because
So
now more on the TA side, like we look at things like if someone has 80% of the requirements, we'll bring them on board. But if they have like if they're missing a couple areas, like which can happen in more of the recruiting process when we're bringing someone aboard, if there's a couple of things that are missing, now we're identifying, well, okay, what are the intangibles for this person, and that's what they'll identify more than anything else, and that's the feedback that I've been getting.
I see. Going back to how you said the passion, isn't necessarily the passion of working at Balkan specifically, or the passion at the job itself, regardless of Balkan or any other company. Like they're just passionate to be developers, they're passionate to be an engineer, they're passionate about coding every day, or like they have to know. That's like you would give them more points if they actually knew what this specific role entails and why they're passionate about that specific role.
Yeah, to clarify why they're passionate about that specific role.
Got you. That's good. So,
And consumer electronics too, from
hmm,
what I'm getting as well.
okay. There you go. That's some great tips, great advice. Know the company, not only before you're applying,
Yeah.
but also before you even start interviewing. Know what they do, why you want to go, and what you can contribute to making sure that you're fulfilled, but also that job that you're gonna take on is gonna help the company as a whole. So that's amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael, for being on, being a guest here on the show. And I can't wait to possibly have you on for round two in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great reconnecting, and yeah, I hope it added some value. But
Oh, I
again,
definitely did.
pleasure connecting again.
And I'll put. Are you okay if we share some of your links? If people want to go and talk with you, maybe they see some of the jobs and they're like, you know what? Let me go talk to Michael. How can I get into Belkin? How can they contact you? Do you mind sharing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean,
Okay.
you can go. I actually have a couple of positions on my LinkedIn page. You can add me on LinkedIn. It's Michael Bravo. You can even look up Belkin, and I think the network of employees. Add me on there. And if you have a resume you want to send me your way, my work email is michael.bravo@belkin.com. So if you see any positions that you like and you feel like you might be a great fit for that, reach out to me. We'll have a conversation and we'll see if it makes sense.
Awesome. Go contact Michael. He's your guy. He'll help you out throughout the whole process. All right, Michael, thank you so much. And I hope you and the family have an amazing weekend. Talk soon.
Likewise.
All right. Bye.